You're listening to the Soldier Songs and Voices podcast. Real stories, real songs, and real conversations with bona fide heroes. I'm your host, Tony Rosario. Welcome. Come on in, get comfortable. Let's go for a ride. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Soldier Songs and Voices podcast. I'm here today with my dear friend Standen Evans. He is an Army veteran and an intriguing character, a fine songwriter. Watched him kind of unfold as a songwriter in the last 3-4 years, and it's been an amazing thing to watch. So without further ado, Mr. Standen Evans. John?
Yeah.
Tell us. I always call you John because I know that's your name. That's and I apologize for that. How do you prefer to be addressed?
Sure. Yeah. No. My name is John Standen Evans, and so Standen's my middle name, and so I go by Standen in the music spaces. Mm-hmm. So you're welcome to call me either, Tony.
Okay. Well, thank you, because it's. When you teach mules to do, you can teach them to do a repetitive task, and they'll do it the same way over and over. That's why mules work. But if you try to get them to do something different, it turns to shit in a hurry. Okay, let's get on here. John, tell me about who you are. Who are you, John Evans?
Yeah, just a guy, really. I live here in Denver, Colorado. I am an Army veteran, singer-songwriter. I came up in Syracuse, New York. That's where I hail from, and that's where I grew up. That's where kind of will always feel like home to me. Back in that the heart of New York, up there. Mm-hmm. And I grew up there, and that's where I joined the Army from. And I don't know what else you want me to say about myself here, but
well, I always like to ask this question: what kind of kid were you?
Oh, a disturbed one, I'd say. No, I was a good kid. Depends on what age range you're actually talking about, where we cut that off at. But yeah, I actually was born in Houston, Texas. I lived in Florida for a handful of years when I was quite young, and then moved up to upstate New York, Syracuse, when I was going into first grade. And so we bounced around like that a little bit. There was some choppy waters in the family. My mother was struggling with her challenges with addiction, and so we were moving around like that to get her the support she needed. So there's a lot of like uncertainty and unrest early on in my life, and kind of settled out when we landed in Syracuse, lived with my grandparents for a while. And then my sister and I have one sister. We were a bit of latchkey kids, really, and my father was always working. And so kind of came up, I wouldn't say feral, but without a tremendous amount of supervision, but a little bit unsettled as a kid, with some of those early challenges. And my mom was kind of out of the picture at that time, but I was I was a pretty quiet kid, and but when I crossed that threshold into like 13, 14 area, I found I started drinking early, started using drugs pretty early, and it kind of took a turn from there. So, but my mother passed away when I was 14. She lost her battle to addiction, and I began mine. And so it turned a corner there, and there was a lot of problems. I kind of just kept kind of running into a lot of issues with that stuff. So I was kind of, I wouldn't say that I was like criminally minded, but I was just always getting in trouble because I didn't care, really. I didn't really care whether I did or didn't. So most of my youth could be described as kind of coping with grief as a young kid, and coping with it in ways that were less than constructive, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're modeled what was presented to you, it sounds like.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, that's the way that shit works. The person you are today is pretty damned astounding. You're one of those people that's committed to their personal advancement and committed to a greater advancement. I always get that sense from you that you're willing to roll up your sleeves and go for a bigger cause, and that kind of mindset comes quite often from a challenging background. How do you see yourself in that light, and how has that past affected how your approach to service now? Because you do a lot of service. You do an incredible amount of service for your community, and that didn't just happen in the military. I know. We aren't built that way. That there was some aspect of your pre-military history that really cracked you open to that sort of mindset. And you talk to me about your approach to service now and how your early challenges affected that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, I spent a handful of years with my grandparents and my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandfather was in the Second World War, and, he joined at 17, and his life was, shaped by his service in the Second World War. And then my grandmother, who was a nurse, and she dedicated her life to helping individuals with cerebral palsy, and through the 70s had a large impact on helping get individuals with disabilities into the workforce, where it was, I think at that time, like illegal. It could be even illegal it was legal to like ask somebody with physically visible disabilities to leave your establishment because you just didn't like the way they looked, kind of stuff like that. And so that's that was the shape of the environment there for individuals with disabilities at that time. And she didn't think that was right. And so she worked tirelessly to support these individuals and help folks, become part of our, part of our society. And so, being around her growing up and getting to spend time with her, I think really influenced me with this idea of service. And then I joined the military myself, kind of following in my grandfather's footsteps. And so being exposed to individuals who held service as a high value, certainly did that. And then that, I think, emphasized through my military service. And then when I got out of the service and I hit my bottom, so to speak, with addiction. And, when I found recovery, it was emphasized and really driven home to me that if you're going to maintain a life of sobriety or recovery, that you need to use your life to be of service to others. And so it kind of just started to flow in that direction. And it supports me in a way that, I do what I do, I guess, because one, I can, and two, it's not completely selfless. There's folks out there that say, altruism is really not a real thing, because if you give, you get. And I have certainly experience that. So the more I can serve is the better my life seems to become. And so in some ways it's selfish, you know. So
Man, you just hit on the secret of life that the generation before our parents knew about, because they survived the Depression and they survived just some horrific times, and they knew that they had to help each other. That the best way to for things to get better was to reach out and help someone, and along the way you help yourself. I like that analogy about altruism, because we always do get something back out of it. I think in your case, from the sound of things, you were built for it, man. You were being shaped before you even knew it. By, you've touched on one of my other favorite subjects in the world, man, grandma. Ah, that's that's where life comes from. Huh? This is somebody that really owned you, in a real personal way. Can you give me a little picture of Grandma?
sure, yeah. I mean, she was certainly in my grandfather's shadow for most of the years I was growing up. I almost never even like I couldn't see her because my grandfather was kind of larger than life. And when he passed away in 2008, I was living with them at the time. We got to really build a really strong relationship. My life was kind of starting over. I was newly sober. I was out of the Army a couple of years, maybe a year and a half at that point. And I was really just trying to find my way. It was probably the greatest blessing of my life, is to be able to spend, those last days with my grandfather, and then to be able to really build a relationship with my grandmother in those days where I was trying to figure out, trying to make sense of a lot of things, my military service, and, how I, became so very ill from drinking. And, it was just a really great place to restart. And I'll tell you, it was, she just shined so brightly, and I was in such a dark place. She really, in a lot of ways, her kind of undying love just radiating, like I absorbed it. And it was a great gift. And we became very, very close. And yeah.
Was Grandma a good
She was
cook?
She was wonderful.
Was she a good
Could she
cook?
cook? No, she was Irish.
That's awesome. Oh, I'll have to remember that. I have some Irish heritage as well. And my poor mother, God bless her, she owned a restaurant for a while, but she could burn water, man. And
Yeah.
but my grandmother was a hell of a cook. She was one of those gals that there was no measuring cups or anything like that. You just put a little of this and that, a little of that, and about 10 minutes later, there's 15 people sitting at the table ready to eat. It was this weird voodoo magic that she would do, and my mother had just no touch for it whatsoever.
She couldn't cook very well, but she was always trying to feed me. And that was, and a beautiful thing. I'll tell you, one of the greatest lessons I ever learned from my grandmother was learn how to just let her be a grandmother, because for a long time, I'd come in the house, she'd say, "Can I fix you?" And I'd say, no, I'm fine. And I didn't know how to let people do anything for me, and to let her serve, right? In a way, I was kind of robbing her of the opportunity to do the thing she did best, which was to be a grandmother, to be a mother. And over the course of time, I learned how to say yes and just sit down and let her do her thing.
Yeah. I probably think about my grandmother as much or more than my mother, because I was raised for a large part by my grandmother. And that person always seems, and I talked about this on another episode, that her influence is almost like it's not in my memory in my brain pan. It's underneath my skin. You feel that person in you viscerally.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the greatest gifts around, man. hope and pray to to rise to that level of love for my own grandkids. Because that's our parents sometimes didn't make the best choices, and they did the best they could, except when they weren't, quite often. But grandma, that backstop, grandma, grandpa, just was writing a song about grandpa, those old lineages that touched you. You see, your grandpa was a vet. That
Yep.
probably had something to do with your mindset when you went in. I would imagine that,
Oh yeah.
do him
Oh
proud.
yeah.
hmm Yeah, we had talked a conversation that you and I had a while back that really struck me. Was about the veterans in your family, your father and your grandfather, and that you felt like you wish they would have told you what you were heading into. Is that correct, John?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think that my father was not a veteran, but my grandfather was, and I think I was in a place where I did not have a lot of options coming out of high school. I kind of drank all those away, and 9/11 had just happened, and so I graduated high school in 2002. I joined the delayed entry program somewhere in my late junior year. So my whole senior year, I knew I was going in, and and it was a time where everybody was kind of quite caught up in the let's go get them, you know,
Yep.
kind of vibe, and so everything was riding high in those days, and so I think they were kind of in some way proud of my decision to be willing to go, um, and I can appreciate the fact that my grandfather had his experiences, that he there was a lot of more glorifying uh, sentiment around the Second World War and these kind of things, and they came home victorious. Last time we'd come home victorious from any war, in the United States, and so I can understand why they wouldn't, but nobody was willing to sit me down and help me try to understand that I was kind of part of something larger. And maybe that's just because they didn't know. Maybe they did not look in that direction, and didn't didn't want to tell me, help me, let me figure it out for myself. And I did, and so it was difficult for me to come home and have certain feelings about my participation in the Iraq War, and my thoughts and feelings and experiences that shaped my worldview at that time, and everybody kind of praising me when I came home, which is certainly better than what the Vietnam veterans got. So I will take praise and deal with the consequences of that, rather than to be spit on and scapegoated for an entire nation's mistakes. Um, so I appreciate, shout out to all the Vietnam veterans that did all the work they needed to do, or they did for us, the next generation, to come home and be appreciated. Yeah, certainly my eyes were open to the uh, the ways of the world, and the money to be made in conflict and war, and I just had such a horrible taste in my mouth for all of it, uh, and it was very difficult to come back and have people, willfully ignorant to these things, um, giving you the old canned thank you for your service and kind of stuff, and it disgusted me in a lot of ways, and it still does. I work with it better today, have more understanding of these things today, but I had no understanding of it then, and it really, really had me kind of there's a lot of cognitive dissonance and splitting that was happening internally, and I didn't know really how to work with any of that stuff, and so I stayed drunk for a while.
Yeah. The eternal medicator.
Yeah.
Your time coming out, you said, you're carrying a lot of the mental processing of the events around you. Did you feel like you were processing that alone?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Was the VA at that point offering you much in the way of relief?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I was very fortunate, very, very fortunate that I got out in 2006, and I was probably one of the first kind of waves of individuals to come out, and so the VA was not stress tested yet and failing that stress test. And so there were services for me when I first got out. Had I gotten out a year later, 2 years later, that's when, the VA was getting overran by OIF, OEF guys coming home and showing up and wait lists and all this kind of stuff. But like for me, when I hit my bottom, I landed into the VA in Syracuse twice and to the inpatient psychiatric unit for acute suicidality and chronic alcoholism and drug addiction, and I was coping the best way I knew how. And I was very alone. I felt incredibly alone, in 2006. I was the only one out of my graduating high school class that joined the military. And, so when I came home, all the guys that I was hanging with and all my classmates and stuff that were still around, none of them had any kind of understanding. And anybody that joined in the classes behind me were gone and not back yet. And so it felt extremely alone. And so that just kind of accelerated my race to the bottom. And the VA caught me like a net on a death spiral. And I was really fortunate that when I needed it, it was there. It caught me twice. Excuse me. And I ended up in there the first time, and came out, and they were giving me some recommendations of how they think I should take some certain treatment, go inpatient, go stay somewhere for a while. And I was 22, 23 at that time, and I was bouncing back pretty quick and thinking I'm fine. I can stay sober. I'm good. I feel good. And then I walked out of the hospital the first time, committed to staying sober, and I was drunk in a couple of hours. And I had really no idea the gravity of the situation that I was under. And I landed back in the hospital about 3 months later. And that time, that was July 2nd, 2007. And I went inpatient for a couple months. I haven't found it necessary to take a drink or use any drugs from that day to this. I went outpatient and this kind of thing. I did outpatient treatment and a lot of support. So I'm one of the fortunate ones that got the care he needed when he needed it. I know that is not everyone's situation. So
yeah, I tend to think that that's not the commonality. That the commonality among the veteran community is quite sadly just soaked in alcoholism and drug addiction. Because that's the go-to coping mechanism when there's no other answers. I've said it before. I think that alcohol has been more damaging to the recovery of veterans en masse than any other thing.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I saw this quote. It's probably from like the 1500s, so it was more relevant then. But It said, "Drink half, drown more men than the sea." And like when they were still using the word half, but it's true, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've talked a little about your journey with sobriety, and where was music in all of this? How did you come to music?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up. My mother loved. I mean, she was a huge fan of Paul Simon, Brooks and Dunn, and kind of '90s country. And my father was always playing the Beatles and Bruce Springsteen, and also like '90s country. And so I came up with that stuff. And as I grew up, you know, my ear lent itself to more angsty, fast, and angry, you know, punk rock and stuff like that. All those different bands, kind of to match what I understand now, my internal frequency. And you know, and I've always loved, always had a kind of bit of an eclectic ear for all types of music. And when I joined the Army, I had a good buddy, Jared, who probably one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given. You know, his going away present for me was this tower of CDs. All, you know, it was like 100 CDs, a bunch of bands and stuff I had never heard of. And so when I went off to the Army, I had a Discman, and you know, and I would spend time just listening to music, always connecting people around music. And I think, you know, I can remember when my mother passed away, I had a tape of Simon and Garfunkel in New York, that Central Park concert, and I used to listen to The Boxer and Bridge Over Troubled Water like on repeat all the time, you know, and it was like a way that I was able to still like connect to her in a way.
Yeah.
And you know, so it's always been a part of my life. I've always had like I would say above average love and appreciation for music and words and songs and the emotions they invoke and evoke. I don't know. And
I just had a picture,
you know,
of that. You know, I can hear that song, "Bridge Over Troubled Water," and just imagine you and knowing you and imagining that person in pain, and that song being just perfect, a balm, you know,
yeah,
for
yeah,
a young and troubled soul.
totally. Yeah, I used to listen to it every day before I went to school. And you know, when I got out of the Army and I was working with a lot of really strong emotions, really big feelings, I you know, and I ended up getting sober, and the thing is like when you're drinking all the time and you're just kind of, that's your whole kind of life. When that goes away, there's this massive void to fill. And you know, I spend a lot of time going to meetings and recovery spaces and things like that, but you still, you know, have all this time. And I was about a year and a half sober, and I picked up the guitar. My cousin was living with me at the time, and he played a little bit of guitar, and he showed me some of my first chords, and that was it. You know what I mean? That was roughly, I don't know, 16 years ago, and I haven't put it down. And it is, you know, picking up an instrument. I cannot recommend strongly enough to anyone who may hear this, like, if you're dealing with any kind of strong emotions, challenging emotional situations, like, pick up an instrument, learn it, and express in creative ways, because I don't know, it's done wonders for me in my life. And I think art's, you know, it's funny, you know, that the VA and the mental health community at large, you know, have adopted, you know, talk therapy as the gold standard for treatment for post-traumatic stress and other challenges. And in my experience, the things that I have seen and experienced, they leave you without words. they leave you speechless. And I can understand the appreciation and appreciate the effort to try to put words to the experiences, but sometimes you can't, sometimes you can't, but maybe you can paint a picture or write a song or talk around it or come at it from a different angle, come at it from the side. It's more approachable that way. Some of these experiences are so intense. It's like to talk about them actually, they're in some strange way, they're almost sacred. They're so intense. But for me, the way that I found a lot of healing around my military service is through music and songwriting.
That's how I met you. Was at the VA hospital.
That's right.
Over a song.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. For clarification, and I hope this is okay, John. John is a peer support counselor at the VA hospital here in Denver. Is that correct?
I was. That's when we met. When we met, that's what I was doing.
Okay.
I left that role about 3 years ago. I now work as what's called a health science specialist in the COIN, which is the Center of Innovation at the Denver VA. And I'm a program manager for a program called the Vet to Vet for Chronic Pain program. And so...
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, we started a program for veterans who are living in chronic pain, more specifically rural veterans who live in chronic pain, who may be quite a distance away from any resources. And it's a fully virtual group. It is led by veterans with chronic pain. It is for veterans with chronic pain. So this is not a licensed provider group. These are veterans coming together to support one another to live better with chronic pain and mostly support, and stave off isolation and loneliness. Because when people are living in rural areas and they are suffering from debilitating pain, it's really a challenge. And so we did that. We started that 3 years ago here in Eastern Colorado, and it's been running. Next week will be 2 years, and we have expanded the program out to, I think, 14 sites nationally. And so this program is becoming a national program, and it's really that's what I do day to day.
I would like to weigh in that
okay.
On pain and music. I have noticed, and I was talking to Don about this on one of the other episodes, that I don't feel pain while I'm playing music. I've got this kind of arthritis thing with my back, it's there all the time. But while I'm sitting down playing, and I don't feel it. It's not there, and I think that there's something there. I think we may be onto something.
Yeah. I mean, it's healing in so many ways. You know? And
I just in my mind, it feels like my body can't do the two things at once, and it's always going to go for the music because that feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's physical and emotional pain. It's like chronic pain. It's like, I mean, we don't. Yes, that most of the folks in the group are dealing with chronic physical pain, but addiction, post-traumatic stress, these are chronic illnesses. These are chronic challenges, and they create chronic emotional distress and pain.
Yeah, that's chronic mental pain. I'm so irritated with our approach to the human body that everything below the neck is muscle and mass, and we know exactly what to do. We've got all kinds of shit to do in every which direction. But from the ears up, oh man, no, we don't have much. We don't know much. We aren't asking the right questions. There are remedies available in so many ways to not only veterans, but to first responders, to teachers, to people in stress that don't get really addressed as health issues. They're almost like a supplemental. It's secondary to physical health in the minds of our culture. And I feel like that we are just at the beginning, just cracking the surface of some of the things that are possible through the alternatives. Yeah, and music's just
I would
one of them.
agree.
What we do is just one of them.
The thing about music is that it's physical, mental, and spiritual, and you know that a lot of what I understand, many veterans and, like you said, first responders and people who have to interface with very traumatic events on a regular basis. You know, there's a term called moral injury, and it's really more of a soul wound than it is anything physical. I mean, yes, it's physical and mental, but so a lot of veterans that I know are dealing with the you know, the ethical and or moral, you know, ramifications of their involvement in a war, and you know, how that affects someone's life after. And one of the things that music can do is it goes past the physical and mental and kind of deeper into the spirit, and where some healing can take effect.
I was just thinking that when they cut him until he cried out and the anger still remained, I am leaving, but the fighter still remained.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goddamn, John, I'm so humbled by you. It's hard, I'm swallowing a little bit because you've walked through fire, buddy. And the person that I know now is you're so soft-spoken and so smooth that it belies that underneath the surface is, man, somebody who worked their ass off for a long time and really came through fire. And I'm talking about the fire in your mind. We keep coming back to the thing about alcohol. And I would proffer that perhaps this has been a blessing. That all those experiences around addiction got you here.
Yeah, no doubt. I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah,
I wouldn't change a thing.
I love you, man.
You know?
I'm so proud to know you. So
Love you too, Tony.
There's something. Yeah, you're one of those people that I just are. Now you're mine. Now you're part of mine. We had the good fortune to do some recording work together, and then that kind of kicked you off into your own project that you're releasing right now with some outstanding music, some just wonderful songwriting that'll rip the skin off a little bit. Some of that stuff hurts, John. Talk to me about your new music and making music now.
Yeah. Yeah, I have, I have 6 tracks in the can ready to release. I just released my first one. It's a track called That's How She Goes. You can find it anywhere you stream your music. Yeah, I'm really excited about these tracks and to be in a place to be releasing my music into the world for the first time. And it's been a journey. You know, it's quite a thing to be playing, you know, for as long as I have, and getting a track to the position where you're, you know, ready to put it out. It's just, I'm learning so much. I'm just learning so much about this process, and you know, and it's been great. You know, I mean, my only hope really is that I can complete the circle in some way of, like, you know, that maybe something I put out can bring some joy or relief, or like that healing balm on somebody that might be struggling, you know, like all the musicians that I love that have done that for me over the years, you know, have done, you know. And so it feels like an honor to be able to possibly put something into the world that might help somebody, or bring them some relief, bring them some, I don't know, some
That
relief, I
is the
guess.
primary mission behind Soldier Songs and Voices, I believe. That for, I'll say it over and over, for every one of you guys that can talk, there's 1,000 that can't, and that need to hear those words. They need to hear that voice that is speaking their heart. Because goddamn, people are messed up sometimes with the whole notion that you gotta be tough. You gotta be tough. You carry shit. You know, you don't let your guard down. Don't let anybody in. But the fact of the matter is that if you put a boxer in the ring for 10 rounds, the first thing that's going to happen when he comes out of the ring is he's going to be attended to, physically attended to. And that's, I think that's the part of this equation that is missing, is that, God damn it, we got to attend to these people immediately. You know, the idea that veterans are walking around for years in these prisons in their head is not an acceptable paradigm in my estimation. That is not acceptable. That is not going to work.
Yeah, it takes. I mean, the only way that I know how to stop, veteran suicide is to, stop creating veterans. But that's a bigger issue.
Yeah, and boy, they've been working on that since the beginning of times. That's the stupid part of man that just can't figure that out. You go to war, people die. People get angry. People get hurt. They get damaged, and they carry it forward. You, my friend, on the other hand, have done the magnificent. You're not carrying it forward. You're not carrying those wounds and that pain and anguish to the next generation. You're dealing with it now. I laud you for your bravery. I wish a whole lot of others had A, the access to the resources, and B, the courage to take those kind of steps.
Yeah. Well, there is this, one of the tracks that I'll be releasing this year is called Heal Me, and it's very much about this. And the verses are, mother, father, fellow veteran, and then the world. And it's this idea of, the healing process. And that middle verse, or that third verse about other veterans, is directly comes from a teacher of mine, a guy named Claude Anshin Thomas, who wrote a book called At Hell's Gate about his time in the Vietnam War as a door gunner, and then his transition back into the world and becoming a fully ordained Buddhist monk. And I'm connected to this man in a way that is very important and supports me in a deep way. And he talks about his teacher, his first teacher, told him that as he heals for all veterans, because, and that is the responsibility, if you're going to walk a healing path, that it's not just for me, it's just be able to show that it's doable. And, that I also carry the wounded parts of my mother and father inside of me. And as I heal those parts of them in me too. And so, it feels, and what you're talking about is from a Buddhist perspective, more about karma, and carrying forward the suffering. And if I'm willing to do the work today, I don't have to continue to perpetuate the, that unconscious conditioning that does nothing but perpetuate suffering in the world. And, that's what I feel blessed to be exposed to individuals who talk about this kind of stuff and work with this kind of stuff. And I'm certainly the beneficiary of that. And maybe I get to find a little bit of peace in this life.
Something just came up in my mind, John. I was looking down at my arm on this, a tattoo on my arm. This is Mom. And my mom was, teenage mother, 17 years old when I was born, and it went to hell in a handbasket and dealt with a lot of alcohol and bad choices. But this just hit me, and that in every woman, specifically in every mother, that mother's heart is just as pure as can be. And that mother's heart carries forward to their sons. And I will postulate with great assuredness that your mom had a very kind, her love was good and kind, just like mine. That the love was good.
Oh yeah. She was a light. She was a wonderful, wonderful person.
That's what you bring, John. That's what you bring. That's what you bring to these other people that don't have voices. You bring that with
hope,
you.
Yeah.
Sonny, I'm choking here a little bit. I'm going to move on because I could talk to you, John, for like we normally do. We'll jawbone for a while. We're not bad. We're good about that.
Yeah.
I've been doing this thing with podcasts. I think it's kind of fun. One of the things that I do as a songwriter, and I've talked to you guys all about it, is I keep a bone pile. I just keep notepads with lyrics in them, just a line or two or something that just struck. I want to come back to later. So anyway, I'm digging into my bone pile. I'm going to throw a couple at you. Just tell me how that hit you. Where would you go if you're going to? Where would you take me if we're going to help me write this song? So. Yeah. With that said, I'm going to go to my first one out of my bone pile. Someday I'll quit fighting with myself over who I am and who I want to be. How's that hit you?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty universal. It reminds me of Bouncer Soul's line, it says something like, there's only three things that belong to me, who I am, who I was, and who I want to be, and it's one of my favorite Bouncer Soul songs. Where I go with that is, from my own experience about, how having to surrender to all of it, needing to accept the fact that I cannot change the past and the future does not exist. And I have to, the direction I would probably take that is something about having to somehow accept myself exactly how I am, and that this striving for being different is also some way like some form of kind of self-loathing or not appreciating yourself for who you are and the gifts that you bring. That everybody's, no matter where they're at, doing the best they can with what they have at all times. And so I don't know. I guess that's probably the direction I would go. I don't have any like lines for you. This is a challenging thing. Usually I let those things marinate on me for a while before
Yeah. Well, I'm not really going for the lines per se as where, where your head would go with these kind of things. Here's one. It's over for now, but it ain't over.
Boy, I know that one. Pretty much what all my songs are about. You can. That pretty much sums up a lot of my songs. Understanding that I hold on to certain things that I don't want to let go of.
I've had this saying for years. I've never let go of anything I didn't leave claw marks all over.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, we're all seeking some degree of security. We have these things that come into our lives that present to us, or maybe they're pleasing to us, or they click into place, and they feel, it feels good. It feels secure for a moment. And the impermanence of all these things keeps us in this kind of perpetual state of grasping and then having to let go and deal with the reality that, security is a bit of an illusion. You say, don't worry, everything's under control. It's really like, don't worry, nothing's under control. It's just kind of, it's really this kind of constant shifting landscape.
Chuck Pyle is an artist that I worked with years ago, and he was telling me, and I think it may be a Robert Earl Keen quote. I'm not sure, but he used to tell this story on the stage about it. It's kind of like rolling down the window at 60 miles an hour and throwing the steering wheel out the window.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's how it feels sometimes,
Yep. That's like, but the good news, John, and the good news is that's the way it is for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a mentor of mine tell me one time, said, John, when you're walking around today, he said, I want you to imagine a question mark over every single person's head that you see, because nobody knows what's going on. Nobody really knows what's happening, but we all are kind of presenting as if we do. And it's important to remember that when I feel lost or confused or whatever, it's like, trust me. It's like nobody knows what's going on here.
Well, there's no way to even begin to start with the list of things I don't know, I'll tell you that. And it grows every day. I think we're about there, John.
All right.
I want, before we close it up, I want to say again, John Standen Evans has got a bunch of new music coming out on Spotify and Apple, iTunes, and all the whole 9 yards. Some really wonderful music and some really well-crafted music, and more importantly, some music that somebody needs to hear. And I'm betting that it's going to be some of the people in the veterans community that are going to need it the most. I applaud you, John Standen Evans. I keep saying it, damn it. I love you. I applaud you for a warrior's heart. And that's really the deal. You can have all kinds of shit. You can have all kinds of gear and blah, blah, blah. But if you got a warrior's heart, you don't need a damn thing.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you for, thinking of me to talk to, and I love you too. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing for Soldier Songs and helping the veterans that you have. I mean, you introduced me to this organization, and I'm happy to support and help out wherever I can, because the mission is really important. And so thank you. Thank you so much for all you do.
In reference to your the altruistic element of it, John, it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
It makes me feel good, and it makes me feel like that there's some people that could actually use some that I can actually offer something to. So. Well,
you have, and you certainly have to me. So thank you for all your your mentorship and your guidance and your friendship over the last several years. I would not be where I'm at, Tony, without your help and your encouragement. Pull me out there to Dirty Dogs and get into the open mic. Before I met you, I never played in front of people. And that was just about 4 years ago. And you've been a crucial person in my journey. So I just want to thank you so much.
You're a natural athlete, buddy. You hit the ground running. John, be good to yourself. I love you, pal. This has been the Soldier Songs and Voices podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you've enjoyed yourself. Please come back and join us again. Check out soldierssongsandvoices.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time around. Bye-bye. We truly hope you've enjoyed your time with us today at the Soldier Songs and Voices podcast. If you want to know more, just visit us at soldierssongsandvoices.com. Sign up for our newsletter. Stay abreast of all the comings and goings at soldierssongsandvoices.com. And whatever you do, be good to one another. We'll see you next time.